It's New Year's Day, December 31st, 2018. And I'm outside here on my property in a beautiful wooded spot, trying to find a sliver of sunshine to talk to you a little bit about why I decided to build a tiny house. I don't know if there's ever just one primary reason that someone sets out to build a tiny house. I think it's probably a combination of a lot of different things in their life that they go through, but I'll share with you the top 5 reasons why I decided to live in a tiny house and why I built it and why I'm living the way I'm living. So the first reason that I decided to build and live in a tiny house was to increase my financial independence. Now, what that means to me is not having a mortgage and not having a colossal property tax bill and not having a city sewer bill and not having a city water bill. I have owned 5 houses in my lifetime so far, and while each of those properties served their purpose for the time that I lived in them, there was a pattern that I started to notice, and that was that you do become somewhat of a slave going to the property. So, financial independence, no mortgage. Also, flexibility to purchase some property. My eventual goal was to find an area where I could live off the grid and do some sort of homesteading activity. Eventually, I'd like to live completely off grid and to be almost sort of sustainable in the amount of food I grow and canning and that type of thing. I'm nowhere near that at this point, and in fact, that's what part of this journey is going to be about, is how do you go from the normal life. You know, I went to college, got a degree, had a great job for the government, retirement plan, health insurance, owning my home, to this type of lifestyle where you're kind of in a remote area, living in a tiny house, using a composting toilet, all of those things, and how that transition occurs in your life, downsizing, learning to use different materials and tools, and the things you start to appreciate. So I have that flexibility with a tiny house. I have actually already found a piece of property and purchased that property, but at the time I started planning my tiny house, which was about 2.5 years ago, I had no idea where I was going to put it. I didn't know what type of property was going to be available, type of rules I was going to be up against, how I was going to navigate that entire system. And so this tiny house gave me the flexibility to locate a piece of property after it had already been built and move it there once we were ready to do that. The last thing, increasing my financial independence, is that I can make some different choices about the type of work that I'm doing, how I make money. You know, at this point, it's still going to be necessary for me to work a job, and I have to figure out what type of work I can do that will be, you know, fulfilling and maybe not as stressful as the type of work that I have been doing in the past, which really took a toll on me. It took a toll on my family, and it kind of made me into an angry person. You know, just living an unhealthy lifestyle hooked to a computer, 8, 9, 10 hours a day, it's not a normal way of living. I don't know how that became normal for human beings as a goal for success. So the second primary reason that I built my tiny house is to sort of interrupt this cycle of consumerism that we have in our country, that we need more, that we need to live bigger, that we need lots of different things, new things constantly. I remember driving on my commute. I had this little back way that I would go through this little neighborhood, and frequently people would have all their garages open. So I'd be coming home on my daily commute, 5, 6 o'clock at night. People would be coming home, and I would see them pull into their perfect little cookie cutter houses with their landscaped yards, and they just drug themselves out of the car. They're just tired, dark circles under their eyes. They'd open their garage, and their garage was full of crap. Nobody parked in their garages. And I think that was one of the first sort of flags to me. Like, there's something wrong with this process where, we build this this big, beautiful home, we come home to our garage and we can't even pull our car into it because it's full of crap. Like, do we really need all these things? And how did this happen? So living in a tiny house and downsizing makes you really conscious of what you're bringing into your house. You know, where are you going to put it? Whether you really need it or not, or if it's just taking up space. And then you think about that when you go to buy something. So the third reason that I decided to build a tiny house was to have the ability to possibly and hopefully create an off-the-grid homestead. That is one of my eventual goals. And I purchased this property last summer. We weren't able to move out right away because there was a lot of cleanup that needed to be done. I got a really good deal on this property, and there's a reason for that. So we had to do a lot of cleanup, and I was only able to start with some fruit trees and some berry bushes last summer. Planted some herbs and things that, you know, would last through the winter. But eventually I am going to try to start producing a lot of my food. And I want to also have the ability to decrease my reliance on store-bought goods or external utilities. I do have electric to the property, and I am using that right now. It is the best situation for me just starting off on this journey. And financially, it makes more sense as far as what the cost of electricity is versus the cost of solar. I do live in the Pacific Northwest, so solar can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge, but I am working out a plan currently to figure out how do I run my well pump. This property has its own well, and it has its own septic tank. So the only utility that I have at this point is my electric. I don't have cable or a phone line or city sewer or city water, and that is helping me move closer toward that goal of being more self-reliant and creating a lifestyle where I'm in control of how these resources are getting used, how they're being treated, and progressing towards that more sort of neutral place where I'm not reliant on external systems. The fourth reason that I decided to build a tiny house was that I wanted to control the products that my house was made of. One of the things that really concerned me, you know, through the years of owning homes and remodeling and doing all these things was the number of chemicals, toxic chemicals that are in house building materials. Very, very disconcerting to me, you know, to think about all the, I mean, you're basically, when you move into a brand new, like commercially constructed built house, you are moving into like this sealed bubble of toxic air VOCs and, you know, the formaldehyde in the carpets and all of these things that, you know, it's not necessary. We don't have to have these products that contain all of these chemicals off-gassing in our faces every day. So, you know, I know you can't eliminate it all, and I am based in reality. I still have to live on this planet, and I did build my tiny house to all the required building codes because even though at this point in my state and county they don't have specific building codes for tiny houses, they will eventually, and I want to make sure that I'm you know, compliant with all of those. So I actually overbuilt this house. We built it to code and beyond what would be required in my style of house. So, but I was able to do that by using natural materials. I used cotton batting insulation. I used chemical-free drywall. I used a low VOC paint. I used some reclaimed materials. I actually used library shelves for my stairway and my bookshelves. So there are some things that are reclaimed in my house. But, you know, the things that were new materials, I was really careful about what I bought. I bought some cork flooring, some bamboo flooring. The ceiling is made out of untreated pine that I just used some natural oils to finish to prevent any type of mold. But that was something that was within my control, and I was able to do that because I was the one building the house. The fifth reason that I decided to build a tiny house is because I want to chart my own course. I want to chart my own life. I think that we are sold a plan when, or at least I was, my generation growing up I was bombarded with commercials and TV shows and things that showed what an ideal life was. And while there's nothing wrong with the lifestyles that are shown, I'm sitting here thinking, who is creating or establishing this idea of what a successful or happy life looks like? Is it humanity, or is it someone that has someone to gain from it? You know, perhaps who's benefiting? Perhaps the person that is promoting this 3-bedroom home with 2 bathrooms and a white picket fence, they might be a real estate agent, or a construction conglomerate, or I don't know, a vacuum cleaner company, or the Maytag company. I think this idea of what a successful and comfortable life for us at this point has not been established by us. I think it's been established by people that had something to sell. And so I want to chart my own course and take control of what is comfortable. So, at this point, there aren't a lot of people that are actually doing this full time. There are a few. There's no one that I know in my area that's living like this, that built their own tiny house and is living on their own property. I'm sure there are. I'm not familiar with them at this point, which I hope to be eventually. People hopefully will reach out to me and I can reach out to them and get to know them. But I now have the ability to decide or experiment with what makes a human safe, what makes them comfortable, what makes them happy, what is the true meaning behind, happiness in life. Is it more stuff? Is it this 3-bedroom house? I could be completely wrong. Maybe it is. But I suspect that it is not. And I think of this quote that I heard from Russell Brand, but if you are not running on a conscious program, you are being run by an unconscious one. And I think a lot of people in this world are running on an unconscious program that has been handed to them by people that have something to gain from it. So if you don't protect your own best interests and figure out what your interests are, someone else is going to hand you theirs and have you walk down the path that is most beneficial for them. So that's it. Those are the top 5 reasons that I decided to build and live in a tiny house. And I'm going to spend the next year sharing my journey with you, what happens after the tiny house gets built, after that beautiful professional camera crew comes through and takes pictures and makes this awesome video about the new and exciting adventure of moving into a tiny house. What happens? How do you live? What are the challenges that you face? What are the things that I did wrong? What are the things that I would change? What are the things that were a major success for me? And share those with you. So that way, if someone decides that they want to go on their own journey and chart their own course and decides that living in a tiny house is something that they want to do, they have some resource and some guide of someone that's actually been living in it. I've been living in my tiny house now for almost a year, and we've learned a few things, and we're still working on it. It's still not done. There are several things in my house that need to be finished, and I'm going to take you along that journey to living day to day in a tiny house and starting to create a homestead garden, and eventually, hopefully, moving completely off the grid and being self-reliant. So that's all for now. Thank you. Please like and subscribe if you like this video. I'm going to have a lot of informational videos coming along in the next month. So thank you very much for watching.